Pause the recording.
304. 304. Bill Urban will be secretary for the meeting and take our minutes. I think we start off with a roll call. I'm here. I'm George Savage. Stephen Casani? Here. All right. Lucy Neely?
Here.
Jason Pressman? Here. Michelle Tica? Here. Bill Urban?
Here.
Ken Levine? Here. All right. We're all present and accounted for. I think
And
this is
George, excuse me through the chair. I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm going to be turning my camera off. I'm going to be observing the meeting, but
Okay.
I just wanted to say hello before I did that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. And we have Judith Pasco here in the room as well from Town Council, so that should be noted. Next item on the agenda is the oral communications from the public for items not on the agenda. Who would like to speak? Anybody? Do you see anyone? I don't see anyone here.
No one else is on Zoom then, is that?
I just see Jim on Zoom, Sarah.
it's not,
Well, maybe I'm not seeing everybody's.
So where would the other Zoom people be?
Yeah, I'm looking. Is this everybody?
Is Sarah's the only one?
No, it shows eight
And then-
participants here. And well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I see everyone here. So it's a light participation group today, and I don't see any hands up. Going once, going twice. All right. We will move on to number 3. There are no announcements or presentations. We'll move to item 4, approval of our minutes. I'd like to thank Lucy for some very detailed minutes. And I wonder if everyone's had a chance to read them. They were appended to the meeting package
Just
shortly
this
after it went
morning.
up later
Yeah.
on that same night.
They're just being published this morning.
Oh, this morning. Okay.
Mhm.
Would everyone like to take a little bit of time to read them now? Can you download them? or-
They're quite long in terms of,
Should we defer? Is it,
I think it would be okay if they're posted as draft minutes to table till the next meeting.
okay?
potentially.
So the action item is, it's suggested by Lucy that I support is that we accept these as draft minutes to allow everyone to review them thoroughly, and then our next meeting, we will formally approve the meeting minutes from the April 25th meeting, as well as the minutes from this meeting.
And I had a suggestion in our last meeting for the Brown Act Committee discussion. We had talked about what level of minutes we want, and we wanted somewhere between action and verbatim.
Mhm.
Mine are quite long, the ones I took. So I imagine, people could just decide if that's above the upper threshold, and we can use that as a reference point going forward.
Yeah, I would say you have the gold standard for, my AI sort of transcription software doesn't do as good a job. It's really good. I don't know how you type it that. Actually produced by ChatGPT. Yeah, there you go. I didn't get.
I don't think they were actually emailed out.
It's on the, no, it's on the link of the website. Separate, link to
Posting,
the
it's a
minutes
posting, yeah.
that were posted. Yes.
Yeah, so, and again, apologies, as we'll hear from staff, with the labor shortage we have, the staff shortage and all the demands, that it was a real effort to get the budget out for us to review, and the minutes and what have you was just tough to get it all together here, but I'm glad we can be here to do this. Okay. So minutes will be deferred to the next meeting. And so that brings us up to item 5, new business. And as I always like to start, I would like to start with the status of the pending audits of our financials and where we are and what progress has been made.
Hello? Okay, great. Good afternoon, Finance Committee. To report on the audit status, we have continued to make progress with one of our new temps, the senior accountant. He's been working really closely with our fiscal consultant, Jim Sacco, to continue the progress on the data integration and the cleanup between the systems, the old system and then the new system. So they are continuing to work on that and the reconciliation and continuing that progress. So the most important, the most crucial part of providing the necessary information to the auditors is all of the accounting and making sure that we have all of our information accessible and all of the documentation. So they have been moving forward with that and making progress in that area.
Any further sense for when we could expect to see us get to the audit stage and any ability to estimate completion for one or both of them?
If we continue with the we're also expecting to recruit for a permanent senior accountant. So with that, it's a little bit hard to tell since I currently only have temp staff.
Mhm.
So I would anticipate we should have quite a lot of progress towards the fall area
Mhm.
of the calendar. So that's kind of where I'm expecting that we should make the most progress and have further communication and documentation with the auditors.
Okay.
Yes. Sure.
So, well, first, let me introduce myself, Starla Jerome Robinson, and I've met several of you previously when I worked here, but for those who I haven't met, I've just been doing some consulting with the town during all these vacancies. So I think what Cindy and I would like to do is put together a game plan on the completion of the audits. And we've been nose down on the budget for the last couple of weeks, so we have not had an opportunity to do that. But I think we will in the next couple of weeks, and we'd be glad to put that on the agenda for the next Finance Committee meeting, and then also for the City Council. And we can, I don't know how long we'll take to get that done, but I'd say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we should be able to complete it. And we can email that to you so that you have it for further discussion. And we'll try and include or incorporate tasks and milestones because, progress is contingent on us completing one task, which rolls into the next task. So
Okay.
I think that'd be helpful for everybody.
All right, well, thank you. So what I'll take away from that is that you will email all of us the game plan, sort of the estimated burn down of activities and getting to the audit completion in the next few weeks, and we will have a more thorough discussion at the next meeting. Sound good? Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay. That then brings us to the next item, which is related to this
Yes.
item because it's the all-important staffing question in terms of how things are going there, both in finance and generally.
Yes, definitely. So with our vacancies, we are moving forward with hiring as I mentioned a few minutes ago, for a permanent senior accountant. So we plan to bring forward to council on Wednesday, on the 14th, a adjustment to the position, which was currently the finance analyst. So with the hiring of our temps, we have determined that we definitely need a higher skill set than what we originally had with our analysts. So we will be making an adjustment to the position from finance analyst to senior accountant because we have seen the progress with the temp that we've hired for, this is now week 6. So we do plan to bring that forward to council next week and then move forward with the recruitment and hopefully hire for that particular position. We also intend to we currently have another temp for our finance technician. And we also intend to fully staff that one with a permanent staff member as well, related to finance. We still have other vacancies as well. Our town clerk, we've made some progress on that, and so hopefully we should be making a good announcement soon for our town clerk as well.
So any chance you could hire a temp?
Yeah, it's definitely open. It would be open. So we would encourage their current temps, which would be, they have existing work and experience now with our system. So yes, we would encourage the current temps to apply for those open recruitments as well.
Very good. In terms of recruiting strategies, are you confident that you'll see decent results with the recruiting approach that you have? Or do we have a recruiter assisting us, for example, or is this just postings to sites, or what's the approach?
We have not acquired a recruitment firm for this position. This is all just going to be handled in-house. So our assistant town manager, Corey Soccer, has been the one who has been taking the lead on this position. So she's also been helping me with HR, as HR is also a finance responsibility. So she's been helping me with that as well. I'll be doing that all in-house.
Okay. Right. And well, fingers crossed that we have quick uptake on that. All right. Anything else on the staffing or before we turn to the main item?
Nothing additional.
Okay. Oh, yeah. You know what? That's a great point. I've been reverting to our old, less formal ways. Any public comment, by the way, on audit status or town staffing? Oh, yes.
In referring to financials and audits, can you state the years that we're talking about?
Sure. This would be for our fiscal year 2020-21. That would be the first audit that we would
So-
be
2020 or 2021?
it's a fiscal year 2020
Okay.
and 2021. So it's fiscal year 2021.
Okay, and everything's done for, I know this not go back and forth, but and then everything's done and for 2022, that's 2021, 2022 is already done?
No, 2019, 2020 was
Done,
done 2 meetings ago, I believe.
correct.
And then we're still behind 2 years.
Okay. So any progress on 2021 to 2022?
Well, that's what we were just discussing, which is,
Oh, but it didn't say the years, and so that's why I'm asking.
yeah, the idea was, I believe, was on both audits, was the system issues of the older, as I understand it, finance system and the new finance system. The documentation work is applying to both.
And just to ask, I can't remember the year that we started open.gov.
I believe we first made the arrangement in 2020.
It was
is that right?
January 2020 was when
Yeah,
the
yeah.
contract was signed.
I
Yes.
remember we were all very happy to talk about it, and then we all got
Yes.
locked in our houses very shortly.
Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Lucy, for reminding me about asking about comments. Let's move on to the budget. Cindy, would you like to present to us what it's all about?
Yes.
I'm just going to make a couple of introductory comments. I don't know how much you've had a chance to look at the budget yet, but I can assure you this is not a budget I'm happy to be presenting, nor is Cindy. I think it's starkly clear that there's an immediate problem. and a continuing problem. So I think last year with the housing element, a lot of funds were put into consultants to help assist complete the housing element. But those are really one-time funds or once or twice funds. But we have recently been advised by the county that we had a great contract for the sheriff's and public safety contract. And in fact, this year they claim, and I think this is probably legitimate, that they lost $500,000 on that arrangement. So as we move forward, they will be charging us significantly more. In fact, year to year, it's an $850,000 increase. Now, for this coming year, I think we're looking at that. We're looking to resolve that partially with the remaining ARPA funds. So we're putting a little bit over $400,000 towards that increase from ARPA, and that will wipe out our ARPA funds, which is fine because they're going to expire anyway. And the county has to date agreed to forgive the excess first quarter charge, and that's about $200,000. But there's a long-term problem. And so I think the task ahead for all of us will be to look towards new revenue sources. And then for this year, and we've not included this piece in it, the potential adjustments that can be made to reduce the deficit position we're in right now. So that is the cheerful introduction to the 23-24 budget. And all of that, the sheriff's contract, other than ARPA, is really focused on the general fund. I can say that we'd be glad to go through all the funds with you today if that's your preference, but they are balanced, except for the general fund. So, and the general fund is where the council has the most discretion. And so it's always the most interesting and important fund for us to look at. So with that as a bombshell introduction, I'll turn it over to our great finance director, Cindy.
Hello, Finance Committee. We're here to present the proposed fiscal year 2023-24 budget. In our presentation today, we will be reviewing the components of the annual budget, including the revenues and expenditures over the funds, some issues to monitor and consider, and have those open for discussion. And then at the end of the meeting, we will open up for any questions and comments at the end of the presentation. In our proposed budget, it is inclusive of our council priorities, specifically focused on some of our high-level components, which would be public safety, of course, including also the wildfire issues. There's a concerning decrease, as Starla mentioned, of the decrease in fund balance over the prior fiscal year. Overall, there is a modest capital improvement program by the number of projects. The main project that is included in our budget this year is our road improvement, our annual street resurfacing project. This project is mainly funded by special revenue funds, funds specifically directed for road improvement within the town, with some general fund support as well. Through our analysis of the ARPA funds, we had not quite maximized all of the possible expenditures within the ARPA funds. So we did some further analysis through preparing this budget, and we did identify some remaining expenditures that would be captured this year under ARPA, but anything remaining, we decided that it would be much better to use and utilize those ARPA funds to reduce the overall impact on general fund, specifically for the use of the increase within the sheriff's contract. With our salaries and benefits, we did not increase any positions, same positions, same staff level as we proposed in our prior fiscal year. We do plan to fill the positions, hopefully, this fiscal year. There is continued work on the one-time general plan. Overall, there is about 60% increase in public safety costs. This was our main focus in this budget, to identify ways to cover those increases in expenditures over our future years. There will be further analysis through our budget process to identify reductions in our budget. If there's any way that we can cut costs, staff is working on identifying those components and any additional changes that we could make in the budget. We do, in the upcoming council meeting scheduled on the 14th, we do have an agenda item to discuss revenue enhancement. This is one area where we have identified that we could maximize the potential of the town sources. Currently, our property tax revenue is our highest source of revenue. So just continuing the discussion and potential options that we may have in town to capture any other revenue sources that would help us in future years with our increasing demands and expenses. Here's a view, a quick snapshot of our sources and requirements. This is capturing all funds. This is just another look similar to the information that was presented in the pie charts. So it's identifying our sources of revenue across all funds. Oh, and I do have to apologize. I see that top column shows fiscal year 22-23. That should be 23-24 for the proposed. Overall, we have our total revenues of 12,902,000. And this is across, again, all funds, with some operating transfers in 561,000. And as well, the total of appropriated fund balance of 2.1. So this is capturing the fund balance requirement from general fund, as well as the remaining fund balance in our ARPA funds. So that's the combination to equal up to 2.1 million.
And what are the balances to start with before these transfers go out? In other words, what is the cash balance this is being removed from?
We do project that we should be very close within the fund balance, yeah.
The budget only shows, budget stuff, not balance sheet stuff, so I don't see the balance information.
So I think the original projection for year end for 22-23 was $1.5 million in the general fund and unassigned and 600,000 for ARPA. All right, so then I think that for this fiscal year, we will not require that much of the general fund balance. So I think that we'll probably come in around a reliance on I think we'll have an additional 500,000 left.
Okay, but if I'm thinking, again, cash balances, what's our cash balance and what happens to our net cash under this budget?
Oh, it will be reduced.
Yeah, but from what to what?
I would say approximately from 2 million to 750,000. Approximately. Right, that's correct. We use the word assignment under Gatsby, but yes, some of them are. And And we're not including the assigned balances, just the unassigned.
That's the 1.1. How much of that is ARPA fund?
About, just slightly under 500, I think it was about four, or it's about 405,000 is ARPA.
Oh, yes.
ARPA is what.
If I may speak through the chair. This is Jim Sacco. You'll see the actual drawn fund balance when you look at the pie charts for the general fund. I think it's about 1.5 million is the drawdown. Now, I don't know where we are and where we're going to end up, but
Oh, is the fund balance number? Is that it? 1577?
I don't know, Cindy, if you could bring up the pie chart for the general fund sources.
Sure.
Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, you can finish. The other point I wanted to make is that on this chart, the total revenues and the gross appropriations are showing the totals. Those numbers should be lower than include the operating transfers and appropriated fund balance to get to the 12.9 million. So I think the total revenues and gross appropriations are those numbers are not added. I mean, they're showing the totals, they're not showing what revenues and appropriations are. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
No, I think so. Totals, not the delta.
Those are subtotals. Yeah, total revenues and gross appropriations are subtotals, but the numbers that are reflected are the total requirements and total sources. So, just in case people are confused on how that's laid out.
Okay. But please go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
And we might actually see, because this is also related to the pie charts. So I will move on to the general fund, where we would see the same numbers. So here's the 1.5 in appropriated fund balance. Specifically general fund sources and requirements. So this identifies here what the operating transfers are. This should be the operating transfers in is the ARPA funds, as well as the appropriated fund balance necessary to balance out the budget this year. We also, with the, on the requirement side, we also identify here the general fund transfer to transportation. This would be gas tax. This is to support the Public Works Department, and then also the general fund capital transfer to also support our additional capital projects for a total of 556,000. Some information regarding our revenues and expenditures within the general fund. Our property tax, we estimate a conservative growth. In previous fiscal years, we have gone a little bit more aggressive and budgeted about 6% growth in previous years. For this fiscal year, we did leave it flat about 5%, just to encompass any additional changes in the market. We did identify some increases in sales and use tax, and we did also project about 5.5% increase in sales and use tax for the upcoming fiscal year. Additional changes in revenue within our excess BRAF and VLF. So that's the education revenue augmentation fund, and then VLF, our vehicle license fee. There is continued volatility with those revenue sources. In the past, the state has included in their annual budget a backfill for these revenue sources. For their upcoming budget that was presented, they did not include that backfill support to local municipalities this year. So we're still not quite sure. I have had recent communications with the San Mateo County folks, and they did not have any additional estimates. the time, and they continue to, will continue to provide additional information as it's available.
Excuse me, on the property tax, did you say historically, or last year was 6%, and this year we're projecting 5% growth?
Mhm.
And is the 6%, are we seeing that? Is that about where it's come in, or?
Yes, so we're pretty on target. What we're expecting to receive, we still have about an additional quarter of revenue to receive for this fiscal year. So we do anticipate hitting our revenue target for our current fiscal year. Yes.
Are you sure you did 5%? Because I ran the numbers on that earlier and maybe I made an error, but I only got 2.5% projection increase.
I did want to point that out. Thank you for bringing that up. In previous years, the VLF revenue source was included in our property tax line item. Because of the volatility within the VLF revenue source, we did pull that portion out of the property tax line item and have that separate so we can monitor it a little bit closer.
Okay. What's the LF?
Vehicle license fee.
Thank you.
We can explain it.
Yeah, the cartel.
And additionally, with revenue sources, our UUT, as I mentioned, I believe in the last Finance Committee meeting, that effective July 1st, the discount rate of 1% for the overall UUT will expire. So beginning July 1st of this year, 2023, we will have an additional 1% captured for the general fund portion of UUT. So there will be an additional 1% that's been factored in the budget as well. Within our expenditures related to employee services and benefits, we did not add any new positions over the prior fiscal year, but we did incorporate a cost of living increase across all existing staff, and that's also included in the budget. Again, our big ticket item, the substantial increase in public safety as the county is pursuing full cost recovery. Continued increase as well in our property and liability insurance. As we all know, the insurance industry has been quite volatile as well. So we are seeing an overall increase of about 11%.
Cindy, a question on the budget for safety. I understand that we've been offered 3 months under the old contract effective July 1st. Does your budget reflect that? In other words, the first 3 months will be at the current contracted rate, and then the remaining 9 months would be, you're assuming the proposed sheriff's budget would be in effect. Is that correct?
Yes, so the budget does factor in the reduction. So that decrease, the discounted rate for that first quarter. But the remainder of the year still factors in the new rate under the contract, the proposed contract.
So the flat, I just did the flat numbers and that was 17.6% next year above this year, but we're forecasting for the year following that will go up even further
Yes,
to reflect the full.
correct. We'll continue to our next topic, issues to monitor and consider longer term. As we've identified, our revenue is quite limited in what we can do. So staff is looking to identify potential new revenue sources, and this is the item that we plan to bring forward to council at their next meeting next week on Wednesday. We also discussed the possibility of a nexus study to assess our fee schedule and ensure that we are capturing all the revenue that we possibly can under our fee schedule. And as I had mentioned just a few minutes ago, with our UUT, that a continued increase in revenue sources of the additional 1% for our upcoming fiscal year.
Cindy, how much is that 1% worth roughly in additional tax?
I believe it was somewhere around maybe,
I think it's around 150, between 150 and 180.
again, our continued impact on property tax for ERAF and BLF. As I mentioned, the ERAF and BLF have historically been factored in under property tax. So we have pulled out those specific line items so we can monitor those a little bit closer. Within our budget this year, we do have increased wildfire support as well. Open space maintenance. So this topic has come up in our prior fiscal year budget presentation as well. The possibility of using open space funds to maintain our open space land rather than it being a general fund responsibility. Are also town center facility needs. Although it's a wonderful place, but it does take a lot to support it and maintain the lands and the property. We also continue to have discussions with the library donor funds. So we will be making some communication around the participation of their excess funds as well to maintain the library building, again, so that we can capture all of the revenue sources rather than it being a general fund expenditure. Related to our ARPA funds, so we do not expect any additional revenue in the upcoming fiscal year. So we received 2 payments over the past 2 fiscal years for a total just under $1.1 million. We, in this budget, utilize the remaining funds to offset the increase in the sheriff's contract. So without the use of those ARPA funds, we would have seen a much larger drawdown in the general fund unassigned reserves. Also wanted to go over a few important dates. Upcoming next week, we will have a public Q&A with the Sheriff's Department. I believe it'll be just outside the, inside the council chambers. Following that Q&A, we will also have the town council review our proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget on Wednesday. At the same meeting, we will also have the discussion on revenue enhancement as well as a discussion on the sheriff's contract. We do have a special meeting, public hearing scheduled for June 27th, which we expect to have any final discussions and final adoption of the proposed budget. And then to be decided if the if we continue to make further revisions to the budget, there could be a potential mid-year revision that we could do coming forward with any changes to revenue sources, any planned changes that we can encompass in the next fiscal year. At this time, I would like to just open it up for any questions and comments.
Well, clearly, we have a structural sort of shortfall where, as is common in inflationary environments, our expenses are running up at double digits and our income is going up at single digits. And we have to figure out a long-term fix for this to have expenditures and revenues come into alignment. You mentioned trimming as much as you can. What are the ideas that you're thinking of for revenue enhancements? And would they potentially be sufficient to bring us into long-term balance? Because we have a hole this year, which we're filling with fund balances, but then we're going to have arguably a bigger hole next year. And so how do we get on track?
Start. So we are working with someone who's got a great background in revenue enhancements, but there are limited tools. And so I think the most obvious and forefront of those options is a special parcel tax. I'm not sure if Atherton still has one, but they used to. And I think that's not uncommon. The county has explained to us that several of the jurisdictions that they are have contracts with do have special parcel tax. So, so that is a solution, but it does take the will of the voters, and there's a 2-year ramp up period. To have the voters approve a special parcel tax would have to occur in November 24, and it wouldn't begin to be collected until 25.
Why can't it be this year?
Well, my understanding is that special parcel taxes have to be on a council election ballot.
You can't use the low turnover. Kathy.
Yeah.
With the special parcel tax, does 100% of that revenue, if so designated, go to the town?
Yes,
So very different from the current approach.
yes,
It goes to the county. And we get something
Right.
back.
Does, does a special parcel tax require a 2/3 approval?
That's a good question. I think as long as it's a general tax, it would be 50%.
I'm
So,
sorry, could you repeat that?
so if the town said, we want to dedicate 100% of the tax proceeds to public safety, that would require 2/3. If it is to underwrite the shortfall of revenue, it would be 51% or 50% plus one. So if it's designated to a committed purpose and can only be used for that purpose, then it's a special tax and would take 2/3. That's my understanding. We'll confirm that.
Yeah, one observation, if I'm right on this, George, I mean, one thing that's driving this, the big jump in the public safety sheriff's contract. But once that's in place, that is a fixed amount for how many remaining fiscal years after that?
As many as we agree to, right? I
Okay,
mean,
so that won't increase in the
Oh.
next fiscal year and the next fiscal year. So, if if everything else was the same, the shortfall would start to look less because that would be a very big part of the budget that would basically not,
I think I
unless we
misunderstood.
change service levels.
I misunderstood your question. The county has the objective of collecting 100% every year. And so they will ratchet up the amount on the contract every year to collect 100%.
So it's not going to be a fixed amount for each fiscal year as it has been in the past?
That's correct.
And you don't know in advance how much the increase will be for the next year because it depends on things that aren't just written into their contract with the deputy.
So my understanding of the contract in the past, we've gone into a long-term, either 3 to 5 years for our sheriff's contract. Under the new approach, they plan to do an analysis year to year. So we don't really have an idea of what those increases will be from one year over to the next.
Can't the contract have ranges that you can't go above? How do you plan otherwise?
Well, so I think these are questions we don't yet know the
Okay.
answer to, but I think the point to understand here is the county has audited all of their contracts. They're struggling with recruiting officers, right? And so we're getting our service 100%, but other people aren't, the county's not. And so they're not all that attached to continuing the contracts, which doesn't put us in a strong negotiating position. I think the other thing is that the county has brought up, and they're correct about this, they have a legal obligation to collect 100% of the contract cost, right? So that other taxpayers aren't subsidizing the service received in Portola Valley. But having said that, I would also point out that Howard Young and I met with the county executive this week and began the discussion about our situation. And, to that, he said, we're willing to work with you, which is what the sheriff has also offered. So I mean, I don't think we're willing to work with you means they're going to deeply discount it. And, you know, I think to be fair, we don't know what that means yet, but we are trying to have those conversations to work out our path forward.
With this parcel tax, is this a percentage of assessed value tax or is it a flat dollar amount?
Typically a flat dollar amount.
I had one comment, please. Okay. So we are going to discuss this. That's what the Q&A is for that Cindy mentioned. The sheriff is going to have a Q&A session here for the public on Tuesday at 6:30 to 8. And we welcome anyone to join there to talk about the upcoming contract, the scope, solidifying the scope. Because right now we're just getting basic service, nothing more than just basic service. And then the last thing is the reason why, explain to the public the cost increase. So that will occur on Tuesday. In addition to that, we're having a second study session at the council on Wednesday. The meeting starts at 7 o'clock. And that's just to go over, the purpose of that meeting is essentially to debrief on the Q&A. There were some follow-up questions from a meeting, I believe, in April, where we had our first study session to compare any old and new scopes. And it's another chance for the public to come and express their comments and concerns. So we encourage you to attend that also. Thank you.
Great.
So I'm still confused. Are we only getting one person 24/10, or is it one? Are we share? We're no longer sharing that half person with, and that stopped. I don't think we ever were made aware of that, that the half person disappeared, because I remember many years ago, this committee proposed reducing that. I mean, because the budget was growing larger then. But I believe, again, this is probably at least 10 years, we proposed dropping that half person, and the response from the community was no.
Well, Michelle, let me offer something, because I watched the video when the sheriff's captain was before the council. And I know it was like 3 or 4 or 5 months back. And, you know, they had come up with a budget for the new contract, and what they had assumed is presumably what we had told them, which is 2 full-time. That is, they have 12-hour shifts for the deputies. They have 2 per day, so 24 hours. 2 full-time equivalents is what they had put into the contract based on their understanding of what we wanted. So this question came up, I think, in that meeting about what was the half, but the important thing is what the contract assumes and what they're budgeting for. They said 2, and that's what they put in the numbers. I remember that quite distinctly. But what I was very confused about is when that captain was speaking about it later, I think he said this twice. He says, he guarantees there'll be at least 1 on-duty officer at all times. And I said, wait a minute, if there are 2 full-time equivalents, that's 24 hours a day. Wouldn't there always be 2 on duty at all times? So there's plenty of confusion, I think, that still needs to be clarified about what exactly the service level is that's in their presumed contract that they're showing us now and we're looking at. It's still not clear to me if we're getting 2 full-time people all the time or some reduced level. That's probably an issue the council is maybe already figured out or is thinking about too, but I didn't understand it, Ed, and I watched that full 1.5 hour presentation.
Well, so not to get derailed into the discussion on the sheriff's contract, but I think it's pretty clear that they have whatever 24 hours a day times 365 days a year covered with somebody on site. 1.
Well, why? But the numbers they showed assumes 2 full-time equivalents.
Right, so
That's
one's
what they
working,
said.
one's working 12
Which-
hours
can
and
I-
the second,
Clarify can I jump in and clarify?
Yes, please.
So it is confusing the way it was written. essentially it is, as you had said, it's 2 people, 12-hour shifts. So it's 1 human, 24/7. The way it is written is super confusing, number one. Number two, there's some outdated information in the contract. My understanding is the contract was written, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they've just been rolling it and without updating the language. We haven't had a contract update. It's a 5-year window, so we haven't had this opportunity. This is our first time in 5 years. And what was written in there, before all of our time was 1.5, and there was this notion of it being shared, the half person being shared with Woodside. And what Captain Myers and those from the Sheriff's Department had explained is that hasn't been in place for many, many years. So essentially, if we look at what we had, last year and the year before, it was 1 person, 1 FTE equivalent, 24 hours a day. So 1 person in Portola Valley, 2 shifts. So I hope that, and that's what we've had, and that's what's assumed for the future contract at this point. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
I think this warrants us to be there happened to know someone in Portola Valley break in their house about 6 weeks ago, and it was 4 a.m. and they were on the phone. Sheriff, and they said, well, the people that were told Portola Valley cover Woodside all the way up to Honda. They can't be there for 15 minutes because they're on a call in the Honda right now. This was 6 weeks ago. So that was from the sheriff. That's real information. I think we should clear up what our actual service levels are and make sure we're paying for it. Not really.
Yeah, and so I'm sorry, so they dropped this theoretical half person without anyone in the community knowing that? Because like I said, many years ago, that was to save costs, that was proposed, and I recall the community saying no. I mean, this is at least maybe 10 years. It's been a while. So not only is it really high, it's on 1 person. A second question on the UUT, does that, if we increase that, does that have to be on a next fiscal year's next November 24 as well? Or can that go up anytime? Or at the next November election?
I believe that would need to be another ballot measure to adjust that. So
Yeah,
that could be another potential.
But does that have to be on a council election as well?
Yeah.
Is there a maximum to the UT?
Well, I think you could go back to the community and ask for whatever percentage you want, but only next November of 24.
And what's the current rate?
Total is 7.5% effective July 1st. It will be 7.5%. It's been discounted to 6.5 the past 5 years. Of that 7.5%, 2% goes directly to open space. The other portion goes to general fund. 4.5. Well, now it will be 5.5.
So the problem with the parcel tax is that tends to be fixed. So I don't know if you can say, well, it would be X dollars and then with inflation. I don't know. I don't know if you can legislate like that, but it'd be unusual, I think. And so you were going over the revenue possibilities. Is that the main one? Those are the primary. Do you need this committee to get involved in that?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I think at this point, all hands on deck. And any further assistance, I think that would be important and valuable.
Are we talking about brainstorming for revenue generation? Was that what your question was, Michelle?
Yeah, that sounds like we have a year, about a year to figure that out. We do. We do.
And you're looking at what other.
Yes.
And yeah, I would just encourage everyone who can to show up on the 13th. And I think Jason brought up a very good point, which is I always worry about these sorts of things that 100% cost recovery means getting cross subsidies of my overhead from wherever I can. And if you can get it from Portola Valley, that's great. That means I'll be able to have officers nearby to go to La Honda. And right, so we just have to make sure that if we are paying for service in PD, we're getting service in PD. Paying for rural San Mateo County.
Does the town have someone who's reviewing the allocation of overhead that the sheriff's department is using? I can see them charging us for legal services and other costs of the county.
We have seen the big numbers. We haven't seen the small. I mean, just, how they're allocating it. I would agree that I would prefer, I would appreciate a deeper conversation about those conclusions because they don't look entirely right to me.
It would be great to know what cost accounting approach they're using. That was, for me in business school, surprisingly, that was my most entertaining course because depending on the method you choose to use, your cost can be this big or this big. Both are valid, the different methodologies. So how are they assessing how we get charged back, quote unquote, cost? Really reward us to know in detail how that's working.
I remember, George probably remembers, a number of you do, it must be 12 or 15 years ago, we had a very similar discussion. We said, how can we get more revenue to help offset the costs of the sheriff's contract? And we said, let's take a look at where the traffic citation revenue is going. And at that time, what we found out, and I was astounded by this, we didn't have a huge number that were collected in the town, but the town only received, as I remember, 4% of the gross, the high level number of what the traffic citation was, because the other 96% was taken by the county for the jails and all the things that are associated with traffic and law enforcement, and we got 4% of the money. So we were paying for 100% of the cost of the officer to be the one officer, 1.5 officers, where it was in town, but only getting 4% of the money. And that never made sense to me. I don't, it's probably not worth going down the rabbit hole on this because, trying to, raise revenue by, writing tougher tickets probably isn't going to help the town. I doubt if that math has changed very much, but I remember it was a frustrating experience in accounting, at least in terms of how public safety and the judicial system works. It's not a way to raise revenue. It's all about just the law enforcement, not the financial upside.
I remember quickly you said that they said they're underwater by $500,000. You have one person each 12 hours. The math, we need to dig into it. The math makes no sense. Even if the fully loaded cost of each of those $200,000 a year, 400,000, 600,000 if you had a third person. How could they be underwater?
I think they're actually higher than that. I mean, I saw the numbers there in the report that went to the council. They're big numbers. They would surprise you. They'd make you quit your job. Maybe.
Yeah, I think they're loading in all the infrastructure and the dispatch and the equipment, et cetera. But as to my comment on cost accounting, I have no idea what else they're loading into that, which may not be appropriate. Again, if you're running a county sheriff's office where statutorily you're responsible for covering the whole county, I would argue the right basis would be marginal cost recovery, overhead recovery by you're driving through Portola Valley on your way to La Honda anyway. You can serve the people in Portola Valley and get an incremental contribution margin. I suspect they're just fully loading loading stuff up on us to make the rest of their stats look better. So I don't know if we have the political capability to do any better than we'll wind up doing, but it's something to explore, I think.
I just had one comment. Luke. So we are trying to work this, as Starla said, trying to work with the county. They're working with us and, you know, trying to look for an extension, a little bit more time to talk about it. But in our discussions with both the sheriff representatives, I just want to note that they did indicate, you know, it's a high cost of living area and they're having a very difficult time recruiting people right now.
Yep.
Due to the climate.
Sure.
And then also, so those two things, they wanted to mention those things, difficulty recruiting people, getting quality people here. And then also, they also noted, kind of told us, well, there are some freebies that we get, you know, there's the SWAT drones that they also supply too. So once again, I think a lot of those questions are going to be answered on a Q&A session.
Yeah, thankfully, we haven't had much use for SWAT. Hopefully never will, but it's there if we need it. Good. Okay, well, this is our big issue.
I have another unique question. So the part that's apportioned to open space, first general fund, how nimble is that?
I think it would be important for us to go back and review the resolution, the overall resolution, and see if there's some maybe some adjustments that can be made, and if possible, it may not even need to go back to a vote. It could just be a council decision. So I think that that's an important point that you bring up. So I think it would be wise to think about the resolution for UT and see if there's any additional.
Yeah. 'Cause it seems like, you know, open space is an essential aspect of Portola Valley, but if we're like running deep into the red, we can't just keep squirreling away money for potential purchases and running a deficit.
Agreed.
In my opinion.
I thought when it was voted in, there were two separate votes, one for open space and one for the regular. And I was astounded. I thought, not knowing the town, I guess, I never thought the open space would pass. And they both passed by the same margin. I was shocked. So since it was separately voted on, I would doubt you're saying take more from the open space to take some.
I mean, it's worth looking into. It's like $350K a year or something. That could change. Another thing I was wondering about is just the revenue from rentals here at the town center. It looked like a really low number, like 14 or 20K or something. And I've just personally been hearing of lots of people that are interested in renting the facilities, and I know how much they could be rented for. I have an idea of that. So, you know, it depends upon like the culture of the town and what we want to get into, but like theoretically that could be. And then the other piece, or the other one I was looking at is the playing field and parking lot rentals. Looked like another really low number at 11K. I mean, just for the Zots parking lot, I would think we would have a higher number than that, let alone our amazing playing field. So
Yes, thank you. I think there are some additional discussions around that and capturing and really determining the right, the appropriate amount to charge for those spaces. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure a consultant has a lot more sophisticated ways to look at how to generate revenue. But one thing I've noticed about Portola Valley in the 7 years I've lived here as an adult is that it is a recreation destination, you know, and there's costs based on that. And that's a lot of our activity and identity. And so it's interesting to think about how to capture revenue from that basically service we offer to the broader community.
I was just saying that, yeah. I was just thinking an easy pass recorder and a bicycle lane. Wait a minute, that'll bag me too. Anyway.
Collecting toll, yeah, we can collect toll.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh, boy.
In the parking lot.
Okay.
I have a quick question on the, yeah, the building division, there's a surplus of 260,000. That goes to the general fund, is that?
It does go to general fund, yes.
And how are those services priced? And is inflation taken into account for future periods? And yes, we expect another surplus. It looks like it's consistently in surplus.
Yes. So the fees collected are based off of our fee schedule. So we have brought that forward on an annual basis to capture any increases in inflation. So we did factor that into the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So typically, yes, the building department does come in higher in revenues versus expenditures, but not so much with the planning division. So the planning division also is generates some revenue, but not quite enough to sustain the department on its own.
Typically, though, some planning time is required before building permits can be issued. So you look at them in aggregate rather than independently.
Just wanted to add one item. Just got a message from an audience. If everyone can speak in directly into the mic, you got to be almost like 3 inches away from the mic for everyone on Zoom.
Okay, sorry. Okay, have we moved on to public comments yet? Any more comments from the committee? Yeah, so we'll move to public comments. Start with Rita.
Yeah, as far as revenue in the sheriff's contract, I even saw there's 2 uniforms in the contract. I think it was like $500 and something a piece, which is kind of odd when we're only have this half of a person 2 times a day. What are we paying for? Maybe they're going to charge us for the cleaning fee too. And for extra money for open space, like Ladera Oaks rents that portion at Dorothy Ford Park for $5,000. I guess it was $4,999 a year because that contract was changed. And I don't know if that was reflected in the numbers. And the question as far as before we figure out what we need to cut, are we then are we sending out bills to Stanford and other people that the town is doing work for? You know, any of the work for, you know, I think it was recently on the warrant list, I think it was $9,000 out of $25,000 or $35,000 for some type of feasibility study at Stanford for the housing. You know, are we then sending a bill to Stanford to get that reimbursed? Anytime I've looked through the open.gov to see if, you know, that type of receivables, I can't see it, you know, and it's not coded and maybe it's not for me to see, but I'm interested in that when somebody's saying perhaps there's going to be a parcel tax. And it's really hard as a resident to hear about someone doing a parcel tax to pay off unbalanced books that we don't have an audit and year-end close. And so I don't know how you're going to sweeten that one up, but that's going to be hard in the community. And so perhaps with some time, some fiscal stability, and looking at receivables on things that we've already done for other communities, that would be a huge, huge help. Thanks.
Just by way of question, in case anyone knows the answer to this, how is public safety funded if I did live in unincorporated San Mateo County in the hills near La Honda? Is my property tax going to San Mateo County paying for my sheriff, public safety? And if that's true, what happens to the vast majority of our property taxes here that go to San Mateo already? In fact, are we paying for the sheriff twice?
So I'm not sure I know the answer to the bottom line question, but I think that they gave us an example of Broadmoor has its own special parcel tax, if I remember correctly. And so in that case, I think you would be, I mean, we all pay county taxes and on property tax bills, right?
Yeah.
So yes, possibly they're paying the generalized costs because they can't break the sheriff out in that situation.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're, in other words, if we weren't incorporated,
Mhm.
the sheriff would be providing us our services based on the fact that we pay property taxes in San Mateo County. So we're paying property taxes in San Mateo County. And then we're also separately paying quote, fully loaded costs from our town government, but certainly we're covering the overhead at least through our property tax, which again, this is where it comes back to cost accounting. Are they double counting? They're assigning us double the cost effectively because we're already paying our pro rata share as related to people up in La Honda. And then as individual homeowners, and then as a municipality, we're asked to pay more. And I don't know if that analysis is at all true, it might be worth trying to get into the public consciousness just for some political use. And I see Jim waving his hand, so maybe I'm totally wrong.
Well, no, I think there's a little bit of what you're saying, but the county gets a larger portion of the tax levy to cover the hospital, behavioral health services, and public safety. So there probably is a little bit of what you're saying, but the county does. I mean, what I'm saying is that the county gets a higher levy to cover the sheriff's office in the in the general population. So I think the unincorporated area, there is something there that there is an extra cost. I'm not sure if I'm making,
It might be worth just digging into because it's an
Yeah, I think it's good to
area of
look at.
argument that could create some leverage with public opinion where people would say, yeah, because most people have a general sense of fairness, and of course we have to pay. Everyone should pay, but people would understand if, wait a minute, I'm paying twice. That doesn't sound right. And particularly if I'm paying extra because we have a special dedicated Portola Valley Sheriff's Officer, well, that's fine, except that that sheriff's officer, that Jason's comment sort of really sticking with me, was way over the hill, coast side. And so, okay, those folks over there aren't spending a special amount.
Yeah, years ago, I heard somebody ask this exact same question, and somebody in county council answered the question, but I can't remember how they explained it. But I think it's something we could look into. I agree with you.
I think it would be worthwhile as we continue to work with the county on this
Yeah.
to have them better explain the whole cost recovery strategy that they've laid out.
Well, that's right, particularly in light of the fact that we don't get a break on our property tax because we're in Portola Valley. And I know some percentage goes to Portola Valley that wouldn't if we weren't incorporated, but it's not a huge percentage. So anyway, it would be good to explore that.
Another way to, think about the cost is relative to the activity that's crime-related activity that's generated in this town versus somewhere else. And perhaps one of the advantages of being a lower crime community is we don't demand as much time or attention. We don't have a lot of murders. So in some ways, we're less expensive to take care of. I mean, I don't know how that works into a contract, but I know they're very much aware of the activity that is demanded by each community. I remember being with the sheriff's group, we were questioning them on some of these things, and this is years ago, but they talked about the fact that they spent a lot of time responding to house alarms that go off that are nothing. I mean, it's, but they still have to respond to them. And so there even was a discussion about charging people if they had more than, a certain number of, unnecessary alarms in a time period where there was nothing going on because it was a draw. I mean, they were off the street for 15 or 20 minutes while they were taking care of something that the homeowner was responsible for. So there's a number of areas that can be brought up in this discussion. I don't know how much traction we're going to get with any of them, quite honestly. We have very little bargaining,
Very little leverage.
very little bargaining power. We need the protection. We know we're going to pay for it. They know we're going to pay for it. I think Dave Cardinal, called in on one of the earlier meetings, and he said, really what's going to come down to is what's the service level we're willing to accept. If, 2 or 1 or 1.5 meets our requirements as a community, that's what we ought to be paying for. And we're, that's the cost of life here in the toll.
Well, I love your crime-related activity satellite because there we're a bargain. And I don't know if anyone would ask them to provide their geographical information system records on where their patrol cars actually are over time, histograms. But I'm willing to bet that our people are diverted regularly to fill gaps elsewhere because on the basis that they won't be needed here.
We probably have some geniuses in town that could develop an app that would track that issue, right?
Oh, Judith.
I did remember something. I think that it'll be interesting to see, and I think it's something we should look at, but I think what the sheriff is gonna say is that in the county, for that matter, is that the tax levy that's, that portion that's really for public safety, it doesn't even cover the cost of running the correctional facilities. So they would say that the sheriff's #1 mandate of supporting the courts and in custody facilities is already barely enough, to fund those sources.
No, it's a good point. I forgot about the jail.
Yeah, so did I. That was.
Does this work? Okay. For those of you who want to do homework in advance of the sheriff's meeting, to make your life easier, the town council packet from April 26th, starting around page 53, has the new proposed sheriff's contract, followed by the existing 5-year sheriff's contract. And you'll notice a big discrepancy. They updated their form. The old contract, the 5-year one, has a lot of details about the services they will provide. It's not line item. It's not the granular information that you probably want. The new contract is brought up a huge level. And one of the comments I made was, we really need you to commit to actual functional services here. And it just says general legal services, police services. But there's a chart right around page 62 that has the FTE allocation. It's still really hard to interpret because their FTE is a 12-hour shift. So it's a little counterintuitive to those of us who work with like 8-hour FTE numbers. So anyway, have a look at those. You won't find them a model of clarity, but they'll probably be helpful to enable you to ask questions to the sheriff if you're inclined.
And I want to make sure not to forget Christy online. You've had your hand up for a long time.
Oh,
Christy
thank
C.
you.
online. Yep.
Yes, I'm here. Also a reminder, Ladera, from Ladera out to 280 is an unincorporated area, and we share the same road, Alpine Road. So maybe there's something we could work with the board over in Ladera and look at sharing, or something else to look into. I think the president is Win White. I also noticed the fee schedule for the parking lots that we are running out annually. This is the year to bring up those fees. So if for 10 years, it's been $11,000 for the Alpine Inn parking, that's a long time, and it's time to go up in that number. And Alpine and Ladera, time to go up in that number this year, not wait a year. So I propose that. And then I remember Mary Hefty suggesting that we go out and get a proposal from the police versus the sheriff on this contract, especially if we can't cost recover for 2 years through a parcel tax. This is our time to start looking at other proposals and see what works for us, and possibly a change, although I know we've had this relationship for a long time and we want to continue, but it really seems that I know Menlo Park contracts with the police, not the sheriff. So I found that interesting. And that's my comments. Thanks. Oh, and I do know that we've had a chance to comment on the sheriff contract as the public, and it was captured I'm wondering if our comments were captured, and if so, where would we look at the comments that other people in town have made, so we don't make the same ones? I want to make sure my comments didn't get lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Any idea on where comments go?
The comments so far are in the minutes from the first study session. It's also on YouTube also.
Oh, I think I sent in a form.
Oh, written.
Yeah, there was a
We'll
form online that I filled out.
I'm not aware that we had a form, but if you sent something in, we'll take a look for it and acknowledge it. Thank you. And also the meeting on Tuesday will be on Zoom, so it'll be recorded question and answer session.
Are there other comments relating to the budget?
So did the pension amounts go up very much? I know, last year, fiscal year 22, the retirement fund way underperformed, and I know it takes like 2 years. So perhaps those haven't kicked in yet either, the higher pension. So, I mean, I'm saying structurally, are we going to have, well, we have this contract which could go up every year, it won't go down, and then we have the poor fiscal year 22 performance, which would kick in, what, 24 or something? It takes a while to kick in. So, I mean, we could be looking at some large numbers in the future,
Right.
just between public safety and pensions.
So are you talking about the sheriff's pensions or the employees?
Well, with that, I'm sure impacting the sheriff.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know fiscal year 22 was not a good year for the market.
Right.
And I believe the PERS underperformed substantially.
Right.
So, and there's some 2-year phase in,
Right. That's right. That's right.
which confuses me. So we're talking about fairly large structural deficits,
Yes.
future deficits. I mean, as George pointed out, the costs are increasing faster than the revenues. And even with a parcel tax, if it has to be a fixed amount, I'm not sure how we would have it adjusted for inflation. Anyway, but I think we have a lot of future issues to consider.
Right. These are all good points.
Yeah, we're going to have to work on figuring out how to not only enhance revenues by in every little way we can, including looking at parking leases or things that may not have seen material, but also squeezing costs wherever we can, helping efficient, better deals on consultants, and wisely, hopefully have our staff, the full-time staff, which is more cost-effective, fully staffed as well.
This brings up an interesting issue, and that is whether or not the town should be preparing a 5-year forecast as opposed to our normal 1 year. We do 5 years, I think, for fixed assets. But we don't do that for fiscal. And I'm not interested in doing more things to do on this department, but like now's a good time to think about this.
Right. Yeah, I think that especially once we get the senior accountant position filled, that is something that not immediately, but down, within a year would be really valuable to look at. Although I will also say that I have for years worked on 2-year budgets because that was the thinking at the time that it would help you forecast ahead. But things changed so much in local government that it wasn't as helpful. It was actually just double the work. Not that much fun.
Question on the committees, 100 I printed this out really small. Is $114,000 this goes to the committees? Two questions. Why is there no finance committee? But that's, are those numbers that, are necessary? I'm just curious what the committees need the funding for.
Some of the larger dollar amounts for those committees are to hold some of our community events. Parks and Rec, for example, and Cultural Arts Committee. Cultural Arts Committee will have the PV Palooza this weekend. Although a lot of donations and sponsorships are received to offset the cost, there still is some general fund impact for those events, along with the summer concert series, also held through the Cultural Arts Committee. We do have a few new committees that have submitted budgets this year that have not in the past. Geologic Safety Committee for one, Wildfire Preparedness. This is their first year that they will that they have submitted a budget. There might be another one, but it's escaping my mind at the moment. And there was also an increase in trails. In the past, it's been 6,000. They did increase to 12,500 this year, and that was additional costs related to their horse fair. Also, they have a horse fair event that took place, I think, in May. So yes, we do have quite a large cost related to committees. Those are related to events. So if there is some changes or adjustments we can make to that, that could also be a topic for discussion.
It seems like overall, though, there's a pattern of committees requesting more and actually not using the full amount, at least historically.
Yes, for some committees, maybe EPC is one, sometimes to replace equipment. Sometimes they may not actually fully deploy those costs, but yes, we do have some other committees that have large budget requests that many times go unspent.
I just want to point out for the record, the finance committee has never asked for a dime in 21 years, as far as I know.
Yeah, nearly 30, 28.
We don't even get listed in the budget.
That's right.
Zero.
So we're gonna have math games. That's what we're gonna do. Okay. Other comments on the budget? Are you expecting a recommendation from us today?
Recommendation to move forward to discuss further with the council at their meeting next week.
Okay, so not a recommendation to adopt, but to forward this to the town council to discuss. Okay. Can I have a motion in that regard? Okay, so move second. Okay. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That's a very good discussion. Very challenging issues. Mainly just this general move from price stability, which everyone assumes. So we have fixed price contracts and everyone looks at the budget from last year and you kind of tweak it a little and it's the same. That all those assumptions have now been blown up and I feel like I'm back in that 1970 show, which I didn't enjoy then. Although as a teenager, at least it was sort of fun.
Can I ask just a sort of summary question so I can wrap my mind around it again? So the operating transfer out of the general fund is 556 anticipated, is that right? And then what's the balance of the general fund like right now or?
So the projected fund balance, unassigned fund balance would be 1.5 million. And I think that through revenues are going to come in pretty close, but I think there will be some under expenditure in the budget. So I think that when we close out the books, it'll be more in the range of 2 million. But that's based on, 1,000 assumptions. So in that range.
2 million is the end of this.
Correct.
going down, you mentioned before to 750 or something.
Correct.
And so it'll go down even further since we won't have any revenue, any additional revenues until when did you say? If the election is approved in November?
The next council election is November of '24. But a part, and if it's a parcel tax, like UUT would be a little bit different. The parcel tax would be collected on the property tax bill, and that won't go out until the following fiscal year.
Oh,
Well, another thing to think about is our other cash balances and to what extent can some of them become general fund balances versus how encumbered are they? It just for purposes of emergency planning or figuring out a glide path from where we are to where we're going to, not recommending anything in particular, but just where all that cash is and where it could be if it needed to be. And that takes us to our next topic, actually, which one of the miraculous things about higher inflation environments is interest rates go up as well, which means we can make more money on our money. And we do have some money. And I think, Bill, we're going to discuss this a little bit.
Yeah, so this was the topic about cash management. And, earlier in the year, it was occurring to me that I didn't know much, even though I'm on the finance committee, I didn't know much about how our cash was managed between the various balances and so forth and how it was invested or moved around. And so I asked Cindy if she could give me a couple of numbers. I asked the following questions. I said, tell me what the different financial institutions and accounts are that we have set up for holding all of our funds, both the unrestricted and restricted, just wherever it is. The name of the institutions, what the account current balance is. We did it as of the end of April this year, and what the current annualized yield or interest rate return is on each of those accounts. Because like all of you, I've noticed the interest rates have been going up and money market rates have been going up. Inflation's high too, but whereas a lot of bank accounts were paying virtually nothing a year and a half ago, most of them started paying substantial amounts and they've grown. So I'm just going to repeat the numbers that Cindy gave me because they're eye-opening. The largest single place we hold funds is in the local agency investment fund. And as of the end of April, we had just over 12 million there across all of our fund balances. And the current annualized rate we are earning on that money was 2.83% as of March. And I think it moved up slightly at the end of April. I checked the other day, it's now up to about 2.93. And we had a little over 12 million there. Then we had two banks, or credit union bank we deal with. Largest amount was at Bank of America. At the end of April, we had just over 4.2 million at the Bank of America in a non-interest bearing account, zero. We also had accounts at Technology Credit Union. There are three different accounts, but by far the biggest one was the business interest checking account, where we had a little over 1.4 million. And the annualized rate on that was 0.1% or 1/10 of 1%. And then I checked to see what money market funds are available, and there's a very large number of very good, very safe, equal liquidity in every way. They hold the same investments the local agency investment fund holds. And you can find annualized rates of 4.8, 4.9%. Some of them are actually over 5%. So it occurred to me there's a yield spread differential that's quite dramatic. It's over 2% right now between the LAIF and basically an equivalent commercial money market fund, and it's almost the full 4.8 or 5% over what we're getting on bank accounts. And most of our money in the banks is earning virtually nothing. I don't think that's changed in the last month or two. That's basically the way banks are operating. So that didn't make sense to me. I mean, it seemed like under the government code, California government code, there ought to be a way for us to capture some of that 4.5 to 5%. And indeed there is. I double checked our investment policy statement and the California government code. And it is permissible for the town to put its money into LAIF or to pooled investment accounts that hold the similar investments as are allowed under the government code. The government code allows treasury bills and bankers acceptances and repos and CDs and, you know, all the stuff that you find in money market accounts are all allowable under the government code in a pooled investment, which means money market funds, ones I'm thinking of, are eligible for our investments. So what I proposed, and actually I put a spreadsheet together that could be used to kind of model this out, and I sent it to the staff. And because our balances, the time I did this analysis, the total amount of funds that the town is managing was just over $22 million. Now, about 4.6 of that is in this thing we call the Polo Valley Investment Fund. It's in 3 bond funds. It's really designed as sort of a long-term hold. But the other amounts, the real cash holdings, were something in excess of 17 or 18 million. And so I analyzed the rate we're currently getting and the rate we could get, assuming we have to have some money in the bank accounts. That's where our accounts receivable and payable are funneled out of. But a couple times a month, we could be moving money into those bank accounts to pay off the funds, maintaining the minimal balance, and then keeping the rest of the money in a higher yielding money market. So I did the math on this, and by my estimate on the annualized run rate, we were getting about 28 to 29,000 a month of interest from the way we are currently holding it at the end of April. But if we had, left $1 million or $2 million for that month in the bank accounts to cover payables and move the rest of it into something earning 4.8 to 4.9%, could have a couple different choices, we would pick up about 34 to 35,000 of extra interest per month with no increase in risk, no reduction in liquidity or ability or access or anything else. It was basically a higher returning, commercially available money market fund that pays a much higher rate than banks that pay nothing and so forth. So I'm oversimplifying a little bit because I'm sure there are some restrictions and some minimum amounts we have to leave in bank accounts. But there's no question in my mind we could, with very little monthly effort, once we get used to the process, we could set up a system where we're simply keeping the money in the higher yielding funds and then we move it out as needed. We're in an environment that may not always be this good on this yield differential. When rates were low, even the good money market funds weren't paying much more to the bank. But because interest rates and inflation is so high right now, this is a unique, it's the only good thing I can think about high inflation is you can get a much bigger spread available in the market. And if interest rates start coming down in 6 months or a year, that spread will probably shrink as well. But right now, it's big. And I think it'd be foolish of it for us not to try to take advantage of it. And I had actually proposed to Howard and Cindy that this function, I do not think had been formally assigned to staff. In other words, I don't think we've ever had a sort of investment management function, maybe even cash management function, the way I'm thinking about it, where you try to optimize return within town staff. I know on the finance committee, we rarely talked about cash management stuff. We talked a lot about, investing in OPEB and, stocks and bonds, and we put the Polo Valley Investment Fund, but we kind of ignored the cash piece. That's where, and there has been, and yeah, and so it's not a big deal, but it's a big deal now, and we're looking for revenue wherever we can get it. So the good news is, I would argue there's almost $35,000 a month of free money available to us right now. Could be less in future months. That's good. A big portion of that, however, would not actually flow to the general fund because, I think between our inclusion in lieu of fund and what's the other one, the open space, that's about 12 to 13 million of cash assets there was funds. So my presumption is the higher interest that would be earned on the cash would flow into those funds. It wouldn't flow into the general fund.
Is
But there
it,
is
is that, is that for sure?
Well, I don't know. I
Okay,
See them nodding their
because it's
heads.
earning zero now, and if it earns something and, you know.
If
you
I
can't
owned the
do it.
open housing fund, I'd be insisting that it worked that way. So you attribute the interest to where it came from, but we still do have, it's at least, I think, 4 or 5 million now in general fund, you know, assigned and unassigned, whatever, that could earn a higher yield. So that 35,000 a month right now, maybe half of that would flow into the, you know, the housing and the open space fund. The other would be in the general fund. And, you know, if interest rates stay there for 6 months or a year, we can maybe pick up enough, you know, extra 300,000 across all of those 150. So it's not peanuts. It's definitely worth doing. And I very much wanted to work with staff to make it easy and understandable to pursue it. I didn't hear back from you, and I understand why you had a million things going on. But I'd like to know if you have any issues or concerns or things you would like either yourselves or me to explore or to check on before we move ahead in this thing. So I'm ready to help kind of move it along. I've identified the vehicles and I've kind of figured out in my mind what might be a first step, but I want to know, I thought you may be concerned about whether the government code would allow us to do it, and I've already confirmed that. I haven't talked to our legal person, but if she's on board or if he's on board, I could run it by them. And I think we ought to do it is, I mean, I'd like that to be a part of the assumption going forward from July 1st or as early as we can do it.
I just want to weigh in for a sec. Thank you for that. This is great. And I think this is the greatest single amount of gain for the least amount of pain, you know, ratio that we can have to offset the inflationary cost environment with utilizing our assets to have income come in that could go a long way to addressing this problem. And as interest rates go down, that would imply inflation's going down. So, you know, presumably our problem at both ends would be getting easier to address in terms of sheriff annual increases and all the rest. So leveraging our assets in a smart way makes a sense in terms of limiting budget cuts or the need for higher taxes. Yeah, that's right. I was thinking, I will share with you, when I was a kid in Florida, I had a friend who was this old guy who ran something called Hacienda Village, a little town that was effectively just a speed trap. And it was well known in Florida on some rural highway, and it just, that's how they funded everything. We don't want that.
A couple of quick things on that. I assume we would move the LAIF funds, at least some of them, to a higher yielding vehicle as well. Since it's only at 2.8.
That's one of the things I modeled out. I don't know. We may have some reasons we want to
No, I
maintain
understand.
some
It may not be.
money there, but the important thing is, even though I'm sure a very large number of small towns actually put all their cash there, we don't have to do that.
Right.
I don't think we should do that now. I mean, you know, maybe, you know, 2 years ago, it didn't make that much difference. It was basically the same.
And then the other question I had is, given insurance limits on cash balances, on the certain, and given their yields are frankly higher than the money markets, treasuries, short-term treasuries might be the better option, at least currently. I'm just curious if you have a view on that.
Well, there's a Vanguard has a very well regarded. It's not all treasury; it's mostly trade. It's called a Vanguard government.
But it's a money market fund,
and
yeah.
its annualized yield right now is about 4.8%.
But that, from an insurance standpoint, if money market funds can break the buck and
If you're talking about FDI insurance, they have no insurance.
yeah, so that's where I think treasuries might, again, just an observation, treasuries might make more sense from that perspective, from a kind of downside.
Yeah, you can get, you know, this would be more complicated than the town is probably. But a town like this will always have cash. Could set up a treasury direct account.
Yeah.
Take all the middlemen out. But then you have to have someone in town or some consultant who's, turning the money over, because you go into a money market fund, they do it all for you. If you operate Treasury Direct, you can get some of the same benefit, but you have to be making sure the money is, when it matures and so forth. But there are, Treasury only money market accounts are not quite as good. The yields are slightly lower. So there's a number of good choices. All of them are better than what we've got now. And we might want to start with one and then, maybe add another one in. So that's we could use almost whatever we wanted. And they're all safe. I mean, none of them have FDIC insurance. Those things about money markets. Where the safety comes from is the diversification. It's all short-term stuff. It's in like 5 or 6 different categories of cash equivalents. Very well diversified among issuers. So the safety comes in the diversification. You think about a bank, you've got $250,000 of government guaranteed protection and no guaranteed protection above that at all. Although people think now there's an implicit guarantee, but it's not contractual. So in some ways, money market funds, if it was me, and I do have some money in these things, I feel safer there than I do, quite honestly, in a bank. So, they have all the other characters, if you like, daily liquidity and, there's only one thing to be aware of. And some of you probably remember 2007, 2008, for the first time, I think it's the first time it ever happened, one of the money market mutual fund companies actually, as they said, broke the buck. The thing about these funds is they basically maintain an even $1 share balance. So $1 is always worth $1. But one of them actually broke a buck, and like a mutual fund goes up and down. Never happened with money market funds. This one like dropped it to like 98 cents, and then that kind of set off a panic among people that had money market funds, worrying if their money market funds can melt down. None of the other ones did. I can't remember the name. It was a fairly small one. One thing, this is interesting too, and I was looking at this, back in 2008, the LAIF had made about 3.5% of their total funds. They had bought Lehman Brothers bonds. Okay, now Lehman Brothers, great house, right? But 3.5% in a money market fund to a single issuer is a lot. I would call that a concentrated position for a money market fund. Right? If you have the Lehman Brothers, they went belly up. So I remember when the news broke on this, the county, which had a lot of money from other cities, lost $180 million. That thing went to zero, and that was 3.5%. So you had 3.5% of a big, supposedly safe government-run local agency fund that just disappeared. And there's no one to sue. Right? I mean, no one, all the, investors in that working to recover that. So even the LAFs are not 100% safe. Their own, investment policy statements apparently allow them to do things that I would think would be kind of irresponsible, but it happened in 2008. That's it. Oh, you didn't know that? Oh. Wow, what a weird. So I'll just leave that with you. Give me a call if it's next. I'm not proposing there's something that the committee needs to do other than just say, yes, we like that idea.
Yeah, I think the
Direct us to
general
work.
impression I'm getting, if anyone disagrees, please let me know, is that this just makes good financial sense.
Thank you, Bill. We missed you.
I have a question. I don't know exactly how the process works of like committee feedback to council discussions, but I wonder if there's enough enthusiasm for this idea specifically of this whole conversation that it might make sense for us to have some sort of like official recommendation if we're like, this is the kernel from our meeting that we really want the council to, look at.
Judith already knows about this. When I came up with this, I ran it by her. So do you agree that you should do that, or?
Yeah, I think it works just to have Judith convey it verbally.
I just wanted to add, I know that we'll respond also, but we're going to internally do some checks and balances, ask our legal, consult with Starla too, on any issues first.
Sure.
And then we'll respond.
Okay, yeah, that sounds appropriate, but this strikes me as, this will be pushing against air effectively, just operationally get all the items in a row, make sure we have the right legal opinion and we're doing it the right way, but who's against free money on our cash to help fund our government services?
Past, we have committee has recommended to the council that they move from LA out to the. They've done that twice, not recently. That's basically what you're at. You're talking about some different investments, perhaps. Yeah, well, that's correct. So now we're just talking about what's currently in cash equivalents moving to higher yielding. Once I know, and you know for sure that interest rates are going to be coming down, then at that point, I think we go back and we ask for more money to go into the Portola Valley Investment Fund. Because remember, those are bond investments and they lost, you know what happened the last couple of years, right? They lost value at everybody's bond because interest rates are high. But when interest rates come down, then the bond values are going to go up. Now, you can't predict exactly what interest rates are going to do, but I think we'll have a good sense when the Fed stops increasing rates and actually starts bringing them down. That would be a good time to shovel more money there, because not only will you pick up the now higher interest rates on those bonds in the fund, you'll actually pick up a bit of capital gain if the rates come down and the bond prices get bid up. So that would be, again, beyond what I'd expect staff to be doing within the finance department. That's a recommendation, like you say, that could be coming from us. But this thing we're talking about, once it gets set up, I'm assuming, in fact, it probably ought to be codified somewhere. I'm assuming within your staff you could handle all, because it's really just about keeping track when bills are coming due and moving money so it's available and so forth. It's not about making active investing decisions on a regular basis. We could do what we call education there, correct? We don't make recommendations. We educate you on things we would be doing, and then you could choose to implement them. By the way, if some of the new members don't know this, maybe the reason this committee can't make a specific recommendation regarding investments to staff is that we agreed some years ago. I don't think we want to revisit. We are told by our legal counsel that if we're making recommendations on specific investments, then we all have to make a public disclosure of our own holdings. And no one on the committee, as I recall, wanted to do that for the obvious reasons. So what we came up with,
As I recall, it started
she
with
said
that was
you are
the
allowed
default.
to educate.
Yeah,
but
it
not
started with, that
recommend.
was the default. We were going to have to fill out all these forms and we said, well, none of us are going to do that. So I guess we'll go away. Is there some way we can get out of that? And the point was, well, if we're not telling you what to invest in or recommending, but just saying in general, hypothetically, you do something like this. Because that just seemed awfully intrusive for a volunteer committee, just, providing education, as they say. Anything else? Yes.
I just wanted to, I know there was a lot of questions concerning the sheriff's contract. And once again, I want to bring up during the council meeting on the 14th, one specific item is that the Captain Mark Myers is going to be bringing a chart because there was some question on the last that the council had during the last study session to have a comparative chart of old services and new services so they're outlined. So it's visual. So that's A. B, I wanted to thank Starla and Cindy for their work on the budget during this time of staff turnover. It's a lot of work and compressed in a short amount of time while doing also normal operating duties also. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Thank you very much. I know it's always a challenge to put together a budget, but especially when seemingly everyone is left, you know, and the workload doesn't go down. So thank you for that. Just a final note on that cash management issue. Anyone in the public care to make a comment? I don't see anyone, so I think we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Perfect time.